In 1990, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, President George H.W. Bush was considering the American response. He was torn. On the one hand, he saw the necessity of pushing Saddam out of the oil-rich state, maintaining the impression of American strength in the region. On the other hand, he did want to avoid conflict. Well, 3 weeks after the invasion, Bush had still not made a decision. That's when he famously accepted a phone call from British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. "Remember, George," she said, "this is no time to go wobbly." Bush didn't go wobbly. The United States expelled Saddam from Kuwait. That was the last outright military victory in American history. Well, today, the United States faces down threats on all sides. The wages of appeasement of America's most vicious enemies, from cutting awful deals with Iran to appeasing Russian aggression in Crimea, from bowing before Chinese expansionism to abandoning Afghanistan to the Taliban to sending overt aid to Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. America's foreign policy, particularly under Barack Obama and Joe Biden, has bred aggressiveness among our enemies. That aggressiveness culminated last week in the worst single terror attack on the West since 9/11, in the form of a murderous rampage through southern Israel that left 1,300 people dead and 200 kidnapped. America's enemies are betting on us going wobbly. They're betting on a morally blind media to press Israel to stop her offensive into the Gaza Strip in order to depose the evil terrorist group Hamas. They're betting on an activated left to intervene, to press Joe Biden to pressure Israel to stop. And if that bet pays off, the West will be far less safe. Here's why. Let's assume for a second that Israel leaves Hamas in place in the Gaza Strip, which would be the end result of a ceasefire at this point. Hamas would quickly consolidate its support, not only in Gaza, but among Palestinian Arabs in the West Bank, creating another massive terror threat for Israel from its east. That terror threat is already materializing. Palestinian terrorists have already attempted to infiltrate multiple areas of the so-called West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. On Friday night, mosques around Israel played a muezzin call expressing solidarity with Hamas and calling for Palestinians to join the violence. That will only grow worse if Hamas survives. Meanwhile, Hezbollah in the north, which is an Iranian proxy, will know that Israel is surrounded on all sides and may choose to launch a massive offensive against Israel that would end with tens of thousands of Jews dead and Israel itself existentially endangered. Again, that possibility is quite real. Israel is apparently holding off right now on its ground offensive in order to retain enough troops in the north to prevent a massive Hezbollah move. If Hezbollah jumps in, Israel will respond with everything in its arsenal, as it would have to. Iran, then presumably with Russian and Chinese backing, could enter the conflict. At that point, nuclear conflict would certainly not be off the table. Israel will not allow a second Holocaust to take place without using everything in its arsenal. In fact, an Iranian attack on Israel could turn into a next stage Sunni-Shia war, thanks to Iran's increased regional power. At some point in this chain of events, America would inevitably be dragged directly into such a war. Meanwhile, the world's oil supply would be radically decreased, crashing the global economy. So that's what one path looks like. The other path looks like America standing tall. And here's America's role. It's a simple role. It does not require American use of force. It does not require American soldiers. First, America must provide Israel the material and moral support to destroy Hamas. Israel will shed extraordinary levels of blood of its own citizens in order to protect civilians in Gaza and to kill terrorists. But Israel will require rearmament, and America should provide it. An Israel wounded by Hamas is an invitation to broader regional and possibly global conflict. Second, America must use our diplomatic might to push to alleviate the situation on the Arab side. We ought to be pushing Egypt to open its border to refugees to minimize civilian casualties. We should be pushing Turkey to accept refugees. After all, they accepted 3.5 million of them from Syria. America ought to leverage Qatar into turning over Hamas's leadership to an international body or to America itself and push Qatar to get Hamas to release American and other hostages held by Hamas. Third, America must deter other actors from escalating this conflict. Presumably, that's why Joe Biden himself is visiting Israel and why America currently has aircraft carriers stationed in the Mediterranean. An ounce of prevention will be worth kilotons of cure. All of this is doable without expending significant amounts of American treasure or any American blood. But that can only happen if the Biden administration doesn't go wobbly, if it doesn't start parroting the dangerous moral equivalents of the media or the absurd perversities of international pseudo-humanitarian organizations that make no demands of the terrorist group Hamas, which is currently holding 200 hostages, including babies, but makes many demands on Israel. America can flex her muscles without using American force. In fact, we should. A world without America is a dark and chaotic place, a more dangerous place for America and Americans. All that can be avoided at virtually zero cost, so long as America doesn't actually go wobbly. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Facts, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.